Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. We're going to wait one more minute just to let a couple of other additional people join, and then we will get started. So I think we're top of the hour, so I think we are going to get started. So welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Bulin Tran, and joining me is Fabiola Hernandez. And we are presenting, we're going to be talking about Great Plains and Sage Intacct. The title of this presentation is Upgrading from Great Plains to Sage Intacct. And the reason we are showcasing both is because I've supported Great Plains for many, many years, and I have also supported Sage Intacct. And given the current status of Microsoft's, they have announced the end of life for Great Plains. We thought this would be an appropriate presentation, and why Sage Intacct is because we have migrated many of our Great Plains clients over to Sage Intacct. It's really a very viable mid-market, cloud-based solution that is very appropriate for many of our clients. So let's get started. Fabiola, next slide, please. So just a quick introduction. My name is Bulin Tran. I'm Senior VP of Financial Solutions here at JMT Consulting. I am relatively new to the organization, but I'm actually outside of the DC area, but I have supported primarily nonprofit organizations for most of my career. And as I mentioned, I've worked with many accounting system, including Dynamics GP, which is Great Plains, as well as Sage Intacct. And Fabiola, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Fabiola Hernandez, a financial solutions consultant at JMT Consulting. In my role, I work closely with both our sales team and implementations department to ensure that nonprofits get the most out of Sage Intacct. So on the sales side, I assist with demos, and on the implementations PS team, I assist with the implementations. Before joining JMT, I used to do outsourced accounting. So I managed financial operations and reporting for nonprofits, focusing on accuracy and regulatory compliance.
Great. Next slide. So some housekeeping. If you have questions, please submit your questions in the question box in your control panel, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. And then if for today's recording and slides will be emailed to you following the webinar. Next slide. So this is a CP accredited presentation. So a couple of things that we need to follow. One is actively respond to polling questions. You have to respond 3 out of the 4. Complete the survey that will pop up at the end of the webinar. Stay on for the duration of the webinar. And if you have technical issues, please indicate in the chat or email, and we've provided an email address there. Next slide. So just a quick introduction about who is JMT. So JMT is headquartered in Nashville. It was founded in '91 to help nonprofit achieve their mission. We work exclusively with nonprofit organizations. We serve over 2,000 plus nonprofit across the US and a few in Canada, supporting the nonprofit's back office accounting operations with financial systems and accounting services. Next slide, please. Really quick in terms of what we do, in terms of our services, we implement and support cloud-based ERP solutions, Sage Intacct and MIP, although MIP does have a desktop version as well, which we support. Implement and support budget management solutions. We provide an outsourced accounting services, sometimes referred to as CAS services. perform an accounting operation assessment work. We do proof of concept as well, assist with system integration, as well as support on grants management. Next slide, please. All right, so JMT, we do have our own user conference, and which we call Innovate. So Innovate is a 2-day annual conference for nonprofit finance professional, where we bring together the people, ideas, experience, and knowledge. You'll learn from the best and brightest in the industry and really gain valuable insight into the latest trend and best practice, both technology as well as accounting. It is on May 5th through the 7th, and it is in Nashville. So it should be, it's a great time to be in Nashville, and this should be a lot of fun. Next slide. All right, so just a couple of learning objectives, because it is a CP accredited presentation. So we're going to learn about the implication of Microsoft phasing out support for GP. What does that mean? Explore the similarities and differences between these ERP systems, between Great Plains and Sage Intacct, and then gain insight into best practice for assessing and selecting a new ERP solution. So what should you do if you're, what should be your evaluation process? Next slide. So some of the support phase out implication, what does this mean? Really, I think the bottom line here is, as I mentioned here, there's risks that are involved. The risk from a technology perspective, meaning that it's at some point, because there's no future releases, it really cannot support the newer technology. It also means that there's more security risk for you, because if you were to upgrade your operating system, it might crash GP because it could only run on, certain version of the OS, right? So, but I can tell your IT people are going to be very concerned. They want to make sure that the server is secure. And we'll talk a little bit about the architect of GP and a solution like Sage Intacct, which is a true cloud-based solution. A last bullet here is there's no investment. I mean, the cost of GP is that you pay a one-time cost, and you pay annually. You pay an 18% of the then purchase price. But if Microsoft instead providing any support or future releases, you're really not getting an investment out of it. And to be honest, Microsoft hasn't really done anything with GP in the past couple of years. So I would venture to say most people are really not getting much out of GP. I think the last update that people were able to benefit was the 1099 change. That was about it. Next slide. So here's our polling question 1. Is Dynamic GP a cloud-based solution? This is an interesting question, because some of you may be running GP in the cloud and you might not be aware of that. So let's move to the next slide. So it's an interesting question, because you wanted to ask so the question is, what is then cloud computing? So I took this definition from Google. I would just Google cloud computing, and I got that. So and if you read the definition, cloud computing is an on-demand access via the internet to computing resources, application server, physical server, virtual server, data storage, development tool, network capabilities, and more, hosted at a remote data center managed by a cloud service provider. So I will say that probably 14 years ago, 15 years ago, many organizations moved their GP to the cloud. They moved it to like Azure or something like that. Once it's no longer on premise, on premise, whether it's running out of your closet or, on premise, and you moved it to a virtual server, you're essentially, you're running GP in the cloud, but it's not a true cloud solution like when we're going to be looking at Sage Intacct. GP is still very much a client server. It's just that you're running it in the cloud. You're running off premise. So, so your GP could be a cloud base if you've moved it. And I do know a lot of my clients are, there's a lot of organizations still have GP running in their closet, which, there's a lot of risk with that, right? So next slide, please. So a couple of attributes with cloud. I'm just gonna I'm not going to go through every one. I'm going to just pick out a couple of them, but there are certain attributes that are very unique with cloud. Agility is being ability to apply storage, compute, and resource as needed. So you use it on a needed basis. Distributed over many users. So that's another attribute of cloud. Maintenance tend to be low. I say that because on a client server, you need IT to make sure that the database is being backed up. You have to test to make sure that the database is backed up properly. And the only way to know that is if you restore that database. And I can say that probably many IT people are not restoring their backup to confirm that the backup is indeed good. They just, we've backed it up and usually that's all that is being done. It's scalable, right? Ability to manage large data and volume. And I also will say that it can be scalable also, not just managing data, but also functionality as well. Next slide, please. So I wanted to then transgress over to talking about the SaaS versus traditional on-premise. So Great Plains is an on-premise, whereas Sage Intacct is a cloud-based, but also a SaaS solution. So this really speaks to a little bit on the cost of the app and how it's being sold, right? So on the left is on-premise, which is Great Plains. So Great Plains on-premise, you own the software, and it's the traditional on-premise. You own it. You pay an annual fee of a percent of what the then purchase price, and you get annual update. You get these updates that Microsoft pushes out. And it include cost, certain costs includes hardware costs as well. So when you're comparing costs, it's not just the software, but it's also the IT support that's included. It's also the server as well. And then on the right hand, the SaaS solution is you're not buying it, you're renting it, and so everyone runs the same application, but configured differently, right? Everybody's on the same platform, but configured differently. You've got multiple tenant environment. It's automatic upgrades. So, everybody's running the same release. You might not be turning on every feature of those new releases. Some organizations use a certain functionality different from other organization, but everyone's having the same new functionality. And it is the trend today. It is definitely the trend today. Everyone is going to SaaS. And there's artificial AI. So a lot of the SaaS solution, a lot of the publisher, I should say, is pushing a lot of AI capability into the SaaS solution. And it's like there's AI, I will say, in every quarterly release. Sage has quarterly releases, and every quarterly releases we hear about AI capability that is being pushed into the software, which is great. It's great for the end user. Next slide, please. All right. So the chart of accounts and dimensions. So this is very, I think, typical a Great Plains chart of accounts. So Great Plains chart of accounts is it's segment based, and so one of your segment may be natural, dash. It could be It could be company. You could have multiple companies within one database, or you could have department. It could be project, and restrictions, and fund. It could be a number of things, but it's all chain. It's all segment based. Whereas Sage Intacct is dimensional based. So you've got the natural, and then you've got the different dimensions. Next. So a little bit more about dimensions, and we're going to look at the software later this hour. We have a couple of slides we just wanted to make sure we run through. So the dimensions, this is one way of sort of explaining what dimensions are. So dimensions are linked to, they're associated with the natural account in Sage Intacct. So you could have a dimension called, there could be a location or entity dimensions. It could be a department dimension. There could be like a vendor's dimension. So it allows you to slice and dice from a reporting perspective, report against these dimensions. And then later, just in a few minutes, when we bring up GP and Sage Intacct, and we show you those dimensions, you'll see, I think you'll see what we're talking about, and how they are integrated with the natural account. So because they are associated but separate from the chart, the chart of account, you don't have the segment. Your trial balance, right? Your trial balance report, it's not 20 or 50 page long, which is a typical, it would be a typical Great Plains trial balance report. So depending on the number of segments you have, that trial balance report could just go on pages and pages. That's not the case with Sage Intacct. You still get your trial balance report, but then you can filter, do I want to see the trial balance by these dimension combination, right? All right, so we have our second polling question. So this is an interesting question because does Dynamics GP have dimensions? I asked this question because I can say that probably not, even if you're a Great Plains user, you may or may not know the answer to this question. It depends on whether or not you use dimension. The answer is yes. Great Plains actually have dimensions, and they've had it for a long time. Actually, it's called analytical accounting, which is the dimension, for Great Plains, and they've had it back even in the 80s. It wasn't called analytical accounting. It used to be called MDA, multi-dimensional analysis. People probably don't even know this. And then MDA still exists. MDA is the little brother, and whereas AA, analytical accounting, is the big brother. But the same concept is dimension. It's linked to the chart of account. But I can tell you, whoever uses AA or MDA, I feel their pain because AA is not, well, the setup is not too difficult, but the usage is difficult. It's very hard to get reporting out of it. You couldn't really, like with Great Plains, you can cut and paste journal entries from Excel and just paste it into Great Plains. You can't do that with AA. So there's just, it's available, and it's integrated in those data entry screen, but pulling data is painful, which is why a lot of folks are moving off of Great Plains into a more modern system. All right, so next slide, please. All right, financial report. Let's talk a little bit about functionality here. So on the Great Plains side, really quickly, the financial report, you've got system report. You couldn't really edit the report's content, on the fly. There's no dashboard. You've got MR, which is the management reporter, it's the financial reporting tool. You do have SSRS, but then it's very hard to use because you got to know the table. And then you have SmartList, which is a query tool. So let's talk a little bit about what Sage offers. So Sage, and we're going to look at this in a few minutes, has a dashboard. It's a self-service dashboard. It looks very nice. It's very user-friendly. It has operational report. You can control the report content. When you export out into Excel, it's a nice output. Let me just say that. We're not going to be able to show everything. Unfortunately, we only have an hour, and I can spend the next 4 hours on just this exact topic. So we have to choose what we can show in this presentation. But it also has account-based financial report. So we're going to take a look at what an account-based versus your typical balance sheet and P&L report looks like. It has dimensional-based financial report. It also has a custom report. I will say that the Sage Intacct report, whether it's the custom report, whether it's the financial report, it is built for the end user. It's built for the accountant. It is not like the SSRS report where you have to know the tables and build these relationships. So next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about AP automation. So Microsoft Dynamics GP does have purchasing and AP workflow, but very limited and very difficult to not only set up, but to even maintain it. You can set up GP workflow. You can set up so that you can set up the workflow by department. And so one of your segments, if it's like one of your segment being department, you can set it up so that it looks at specific segments in your chart account to drive that workflow. It also supports dollar value, but again, I think maintenance is difficult. But it integrates with Outlook and all. Sage Intacct also has workflow. It has purchasing and AP automation. The difference is, and we'll look at this in a few minutes, but you can submit your invoices to Sage. It has OCR capability. It uses AI to strip out that data and then completes that AP bill for you. So it's a very nice, again, leveraging AI. It's a very nice feature. It also has vendor onboarding. So Sage, we're not going to have time to look at forms and operational flows that's part of Sage. And what that is, it's got vendor onboarding. You can have vendors submit their ACH information, and it goes right into Sage Intacct, right? And so you can put these forms off of your website if you want, or you can just send them a link, which they can click on it and go directly to the vendor onboarding. Very nice. It also has advanced workflow. So out of the box, it has, it has a lot of workflow capability, but if you want more, there's even an advanced workflow module with that. Next. Project and bank reconciliation. So trying to find areas where we could do a comparison is tough because there are so many things that are different in these two platforms. So we chose project, and then we want to also talk a little bit about bank rec. So on the project side, some of you may or may not know this, but GP actually has a project module. It's been around for a very long time as well. It is I will say, not an easy module to use, but project is available to track project costs. It does project billing. And then you also have bank rec. You could, Great Plains, of course, you can do your bank rec reconciliation in there. The bank rec is a separate modules, and it's not integrated with the GL. And that's what makes the GP bank rec so challenging, is that it doesn't link to the general ledger. So even if you've done a perfect bank rec and you look at the GL account or your cash balance on your GL, it could be different, and you'd be scratching your head. How could it be different when I just reconciled my bank statement? That's because the GP bank rec doesn't tie to the general ledger. And I don't know why, but that's the way it was designed. And it does support the BAI file format import. Again, I don't know if a lot of people use that. I think most people are just challenged in general dealing with the GP bank rec. So on the Sage Intacct side, Sage has a project. It is a dimension, and it is feature packed. Let me just say that. You can do a lot with this module, and this is a project. Sometimes it's used as grant, but it tracks non-financial data that you can report against. Absolutely cost. There's, any cost, whether it's timesheet, expense report, vendor. So it's integrated in much all of the modules, right? All the data entry. It also has resource management. Not everybody aware of that, but it has resource management. That means that you can assign people to specific projects for a period, for a certain length of time that they can use that module. And then, of course, billing. With the bank, you could do a couple of things. Of course, you can do a manual bank rec. And then, of course, you can also do the BAI, actually, I should say BAI2 format, and then the bank feed. So we'll talk a little bit about bank feed. It's connects directly to your bank. And the biggest difference with Sage Intacct Bank Rec is it connects to your general ledger. What that means is if you book a journal entry and you debit or you credit cash, it actually shows up in your bank rec. So the two modules are connected. Next. All right, so I'm going to hand the rest of this presentation to Fabiola. Is going to go through and really showcase Sage Intacct and really show some of the things that we just discussed. I wish we had more time and show more functionality, but I think you'll have a really a good high level view of Sage Intacct here. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. We're going to walk through how Sage Intacct helps organizations gain real-time financial visibility, automate workflows, and simplify grants and project management. We'll keep this focused and practical. We don't have a lot of time, so let's dive right in. Right now, what I'm sharing here is a role-based dashboard for a CFO. This is designed to provide real-time insights into your organization's financial health without needing manual reports or spreadsheets. In Intacct, you can have multiple role-based dashboards for different departments or members in your organization that need to be reviewing reports on a recurring basis. Here, what we want to showcase right now is this company performance graphical report. It's basically a profit and loss report. It's displaying your revenue, expenditures, and the changes in net assets. It's over a 12-month period trend, right? And one of the greatest features that you have here is you can actually hover in any of these columns, and it will give you the amount of that particular column. But if you toggle on this show data, it will actually give you that show data behind it, right? So you can see the information real time. But the cool thing about Intacct is that any report, you can actually click onto it and expand that actual report. And it opens this pop-up. It's not as if your original dashboard got removed. So you can go back to it if you want. But this is just the live version of that report in a more traditional sense. If I click on this little triangle icon, I'm able to expand now all of my accounts. So instead of seeing it at a summary overview of revenue, expenditures, and net assets, now I can see all of my accounts. And from here, we're still seeing that 12-month trend. So my report hasn't changed. I'm just able to see more data behind it. If I go a little bit further down and I want to look into an account, Intacct does a really good job into letting you know which accounts and numbers you can drill down into further by leaving them in blue. Whenever you see anything in blue and Intacct, you can drill down into it. So if I drill into this office supplies for the month of December, it's gonna open my general ledger view. In this general ledger, I can go back and customize at any given time. Even though I was already filtering for office supplies for that particular month, I can still change my time period. I can still play around with my accounts if I want to look at another one. And at any given moment, I can add and remove dimensions. So my view is going to be suited and tailored to me as the end user. I'm not going to be changing that information for another user. Here, if we take a look at this, we have our typical posted date, document date, memo and descriptions, In the middle, we have all of our dimensions, which is what Bulin was mentioning before. If you see, all of our dimensions are separate from the actual GL account, so they're not segmented together like in GP. And then you have here, of course, your debits, credits, and balance, but you also can see from what journal any of these transactions were posted to. So if we want to take a look at a bill, we can easily identify it because we can see that it's from the AP journal, but also in the memo, it will automatically have the bill name in the description. So you're going to be able to know which ones are bills from a typical journal entry. So let's take a look at this particular transaction, which is for an AP bill. And by clicking into it, since it was in blue, we're able to drill down further into it. So here we're looking at an invoice. And in our invoice section, we have our vendor name, but we also see a vendor balance, and it has a clickable link. So I can drill down into that link and see the actual open balance that my vendor may have and what invoices, what amounts add up to that balance, right? Then here in the middle section, we have kind of like a summary overview. It gives you the bill, due date, overdue amounts. It gives you a very visual stamp of what the current status is of this invoice. So you can see if it's partially paid, fully paid, or just simply posted. If it's partially paid or paid, you're going to get another drillable link into that payment information. So you don't have to keep exiting and looking for other tabs into your browser. It's all within that same process flow, right? If you look into this middle section, you see your typical invoice components. So you see the date, vendor, bill number, reference. You also have this attachment feature. The attachment feature is pretty much anywhere within Intact in your journal entries and so on. And if you click on the paperclip, you're able to get a real live your invoice right there and then, so you can review it alongside your invoice at any given time. Then here in the bottom section, we have our entry. And in this entry, we see all of our accounts and dimensions. So if you can see here, I have here my GL account. And again, this is separate from all of my other dimensions. So I don't have, again, to have 75 accounts of just different segments between the accounts and dimensions. If I want to change the entry layout, I can just click on more actions and edit my layout. Let's say that my employees are used to thinking of coding the account, the GL account first, and then coding the dimensions to the amount. You can change the layout of this at any given time and just save that layout. So even though your employees are making a change into another system, they're not really changing the way that they think we're coding information into the system, which is very, very critical. From here, we have a couple tabs. We have a posting details tab, which is essentially just showing you the other side of that entry. So the AP side of the entry, which I know a lot of people want to see, not only that entry that we're just posting, that line item. Then you have the history tab. This history tab is great for audit purposes. You see who created this, at what time and day. If it was modified, you're going to be able to see who made the modifications, and same thing at what date and time. You're also able to see the approval history. In Sage Intact, the workflows ensure invoices go through the proper chain of command before payment, reducing manual approvals and increasing accuracy. This also works for purchasing, journal entries, your vendor approvals. Sometimes there's a lot of duplicate vendors in the system because maybe the vendor invoice, the name's changed and your employee didn't notice when adding the new vendor in. You can create approval workflows also for your vendors. You can set up rules based on the vendor amount or department, for example. Invoices over 10,000, let's say, might require a CFO approval, while those under 5,000 are approved by department heads. And these workflows are completely customizable based on your organization's need. Below here, we also have the collaborate feature, which allows anyone from the organization to communicate directly within the transactions. This is also great for audit and compliance tracking without relying on emails or external documentation. Now let's go back into our dashboard, and I can simply exit or minimize those windows because my original tab didn't get erased by the new ones that I was opening up. The other thing that I wanted to show from here is this report. So for those familiar with Dynamic GP, you might recognize Smart List, like Bulin was mentioning before, which allow quick data filtering and analysis. And Intact offers a lot of the same flexibility, but with real-time interactive data. You can get a standard report like this right from the custom report writer in Intact, and in this example, what I'm showing you here is an AP payment detail list, which functions just like a smart list, but allows for deeper analysis and customization. I also have the record URL. So if I want to go straight into that payment information, I can just click on it and it's going to direct me right through there. So with a custom report writer, you can actually modify reports like this in just a few clicks. You can add any columns, adjust filters, and refine layouts without IT involvement. This is all for the end user, for your accountant to be able to utilize all of these reports and be able to edit at any given time. Let's talk about dimensions so you can take a look at how these actually look. And another cool thing about Intact is I can bookmark my favorite pages or my most recurrent pages. So I don't have to go through the main menu to do this. So let's go and look at the terminology of dimensions. So dimensions is a game changer for nonprofit accounting, right? Like we've been mentioning, instead of complex chart of accounts, Sage Intact uses dimensions to tag transactions with relevant information, such as department, program, project, or funding source. For nonprofits, this means that you can easily track cost centers or programs without creating unnecessary GL accounts. Here's the standard dimensions that you can get from Intact. You can also repurpose them. So if these dimensions, right, from the standard, even though there's quite a few, let's say that you may not be using one of them. So in my demo instance, I don't really use this class dimension. I can repurpose it, which means rename it really, into another dimension. So I've repurposed this to track my restrictions. Since this is a nonprofit environment, I can track now my time restrictions, purpose restrictions, unrestricted, restricted, straight on the entry line, and use it also for reporting, which is the end goal always. Besides being able to repurpose the dimensions, you can also create user-defined dimensions, which basically means you're creating your own custom tailored dimension to do exactly what you need it to do in the system, right? Now let's take a look at how one of these dimensions looks like. Let's look at departments. A lot of other nonprofits customize this departments dimension also to be for programs or cost centers. So it depends on what you're doing in your organization. And at JMT, during the implementation process, we analyze your chart of accounts and your dimensions with you to know what's going to be the best functionality and use out of these standard dimensions and rename them to your employees' terminology and your internal terminology, right? So here in the department dimension, one of the key advantages of dimensions in Intact is that they allow you to have this parent-child structure. So if you can see, we have kind of a hierarchy here. If we take a look at this one, for example, we have management in general. So this is great for if you want to have departments underneath another one. So here we have also HR, financial management. You can have operations underneath it. So this hierarchy makes reporting much easier because you can actually roll up the data at the parent level while still having the ability to drill down into individual departments. Now, let's take a look into one of these and edit just to see how it looks like. So here you can see the fields that are in the department dimension and structure that define this dimension. This setup ensures consistent and accurate financial tracking. And during the implementation, we're going to be able to configure this with you. You can establish the parent. You can add a manager to a specific department, right? Let's move on to the projects or grants dimensions, because this is a very good this is a game-changing area for nonprofits, and it differentiates a lot from that department dimension. So this is an area where Sage Intacct really shines, right? And some organizations use this dimension for projects, others like to use it for grants. and Sage Intacct can support both. So this section is just going to be tailored on how each structure can be used effectively. So here we see also that key feature from Sage Intacct, which is that parent-child relationship again. This allows you to track multi-year grants with multiple funding periods or sub-awards under the single umbrella. For example, here we have one grant, and this is year 1, year 2, year 3, and so on. So let's take an example and just click into one of these accounts to take a look at how it looks like. So from here, we have a couple of tabs at the top. So let's start by looking at this first tab. This is the project or grant information tab. This tab acts as the summary overview for your grant or project. So here's where you can track key details like the beginning and end date of your project or grant. Who's the manager assigned to this, right? You can also customize it even further and add what type is this. So you can add if this is a contract, endowment, is this a federal or state grant, right? You can also utilize the, let me move from here, the status to track what's the current status of your project or grant. So if it's a grant, has a proposal been submitted? Is this pending legal review? Is this a closeout project? Is this active? Is this in progress? So you can track the current status. And all of these fields, you can report against it. So it's not as if you're just storing data here and not really using it. You can report against all of these fields. So in the additional info tab, this tab is essential for federal or third-party funding tracking, making it easier to maintain compliance, compliance records, restriction details, and reporting deadlines. If you can see here, we have revenue restrictions for purpose time. You also have here some other revenue restrictions. You also have in this other section CFA tracking. So it also supports CFA tracking and allows you to attach also any supporting documentation that you may need for this particular project or grant. So you can attach contracts, grant awards, grant agreements, and you can ensure that all of your compliance details are stored in one place. So if your auditors request for anything, you can just go straight to the source and provide that document for them, right? We also have this resources and billing tab. So this tab helps manage resource allocation and define pricing models, especially useful if you bill grant funded activities. If we look at this table below, we see a real example where an employee, this is Claire Danes, is assigned to IT consulting at a billing rate of $50 per hour. So the system automatically calculates my cost allocations for expenses and a PNPO tracking. So this is ensuring transparency in labor and expense tracking, improving financial oversight. If we look at this project or grant summary tab, this summary tab provides a snapshot of the progress. So what do you want to track? We can configure this to show salary, statistical data, or even multi-entity performance. This allows organizations to get a real-time glance at financial performance across multiple grants or projects. Now, once you have all of these fields built in, you can get reports like this one. Now, this is a project or grant summary report. And as you can see, we have here our investigator, which is that manager field. We have here the beginning and end dates, which we saw on that first tab. We have the awarded amounts. We have any amounts that have been fully billed, any deferred revenue, any labor costs or non-labor costs. We can actually also show the remaining months that are left based on these beginning and end dates. So we can create a calculation. So at real time, based on this date of the report, you can see how many months you have left to spend the budgeted funds, right? So let's from here move to AP automation. So to wrap up a little bit, let's touch on AP automation. This is something that Bulin also mentioned. So in Intacct, now it has OCR technology. It eliminates the need for manual data entry. You can now email or upload invoices, and the system is going to automatically read, code, and categorize them. over time, the system is going to learn from your patterns, making future entries even more accurate. So if you can see here on my screen, I have a recipient email. This is the email where my vendors or my employees, because if you don't want to give that email to your vendors, you just don't. You can still leverage your employees to do that. But anybody can forward to this email address the invoices, and the system is just going to receive them. It also provides you the sender email. So this is my email because I'm the one sending these. But if you have different vendors or employees, you can see who is the one taking action into uploading, into emailing these invoices into the system, right? The system also does review for you, so it flags any errors, duplicates, or any missing information. If you see there's no vendor in this line item for this email, so if I hover over this, it's going to tell me a matching vendor was not found, change to another transaction type before editing. That may simply be because I don't have that vendor. Maybe that's a new vendor and I have to go into the system and add that vendor. When I look into the duplicate error, it's because, oh, an existing bill already exists. And if you see at the top, here's that duplicate bill, right? So the system is trying to minimize all of those errors. And this is going to help your finance team prevent costly mistakes before they happen. Now, let's also show here the matching and creation rules as well. So in cash management, you also can utilize the matching and creation rules to facilitate your bank reconciliation, so your employees don't spend as much time during their bank reconciliation. So the match rules and creation rules, they're different. So the match rule, what it does is it's focused on linking an existing bank transaction with a Sage Intacct transaction. Yeah.
I just want to mention, so the difference here with cash management with Sage is that Sage has the connection to your bank. It's it has that cloud connection, and this is where we go when we talk about rules. Is because it's for that cloud connect to your bank, and so I just wanted to preface that, and just so that everybody understands, because
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, of course. So yes, like Bulin was saying, you can actually connect to your financial institution. Um, Intact calls it the bank feeds,
yeah.
which is just you just sign into your banking institution from the Intact side, and it's an automatic connection. The bank feeds refresh every 4 hours in the system, so your transactions are going to be flown from your financial institution into your accounting system every 4 hours. So it's real life data also on that side. Now for your employees, they're also paying vendors and receiving invoices and doing all of these journal entries from the accounting system side, right? So going into the matching rules, how you can utilize them is, let's say that you had a vendor and you paid them with a check. The check was processed out of Sage Intacct, right? So that payment, it's going to be coming out of Sage Intacct, but you're also going to be seeing it on the financial institution on your bank side, right? So you're going to essentially have two transactions because that transaction is being flown in, let's say, from the financial institution into Intacct. So what the system does with these rules is, for example, this is a simple rule that matches the date, the document number, and the amount. So you can leverage a rule like this when the system on the back end, what it's doing is analyzing, oh, from this check, the date is the same as the one from the financial institution. The check number is the same as the one on the document number from the financial institution, and the amount is the same. So the system is going to go ahead and match those two transactions. So for your employees, when they're reconciling that information, they don't have to do all of that manual reconciliation by themselves. The system is trying to match all of those transactions for them, and they just simply have to go into the reconciliation and review those transactions to ensure accuracy, right? The creation rules is different because the creation is just creating a journal entry or a credit card transaction for you. So these matching and creation rules don't only simply work on the bank side, they also work for your credit cards. So for the create rule, what it does is generating that new transaction within Intacct. So for example, your bank fee charge, your service charge. That's something that just happens automatically on the bank side. You're not really paying a vendor anything through Intact. So what the system does is you just create a journal entry once in the system from a template. I'm just going to show you this one. This is a credit card transaction. You create this journal entry only once in the system. You save the rule, and then anytime that the system recognizes any given filters. So in this rule, we gave it the condition that any time from the financial institution that the system read or saw the vendor value Santander in the description, go ahead and code it within the parameters of this journal entry, this credit card transaction entry, right? So the system, what it's doing is just reviewing all of the transactions that are coming from your financial institution side and just creating that journal entry and that credit card information for you. So with this, I'm gonna leave you back with Bulin to the presentation.
Actually, before you do that, can we just bring
Yeah.
up a bank rec? I think it'll be great if
yeah.
folks can see sort of, I know we talked a little bit about the match and the creation rules, but just really quick, what does the Sage bank rec exactly? So you've got the two tabs there.
Yes. So if you wouldn't have your bank feeds connected, you will only have the Intact tab because you're coding all of your transactions or maybe importing them into the system. Once your bank feeds are connected, you're going to get two tabs. So the second tab is actually all of those transactions that are being fed from your financial institution. Here you can see also you can filter the state into those matched transactions. And actually, here's all of those Santander transactions that I was just showing. So anything that had in the description, like I was saying, that vendor name Santander, the system is going to try and match it for you. And what your employee can do during the reconciliation process is if they click on that match, what they're doing is actually reviewing the auto match that happened on from the bank side, right? So they can just see, oh, I'm recognizing that this is coming from a rule. I can even click on the hyperlink and it's going to take me directly again to that rule. And I can review the rule and make sure that the system did its thing, right? That the system matched the correct transaction for me. I can also unmatch it. Let's say that for some reason I need to unmatch this transaction. This isn't said and done. The reconciliation isn't complete, right? So I can just go ahead and unmatch that transaction and it'll just go back to my unmatched state. And I can just delete the transaction if it's a duplicate or code it the correct way or whatever might have happened that you had to unmatch it. You can just go ahead and take that action.
And sometimes you just can't envision all the rules, right? And so if you're in the bank here and if you need to book take an action in the right here, you don't even have to leave the screen. You can book a journal entry, you can book a charge, you can put a manual payment, whatever it is, you can just do it right there. All right, so just making it so much more user friendly and convenient. Thank you, Fabiola.
Thanks, Dylan.
All right, let's move on. We only have a few minutes left. I think the next slide. Okay, so we're next question, polling question number 3. If you can take just a few minutes to answer this question. What system are you currently on? And so we just listed a couple of here. So hopefully most of you are on GP right now. All right, can we move on to the next slide, please? All right, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about consideration when evaluating a new ERP. So I mentioned, at the start of this presentation that Microsoft will sunset GP. They've already announced it late last year, and the official date is if you Google it, it's going to say September 30th, but I think they've extended to the end of the year, December 31st, and that's 2029. So we're in 2025 right now, so you have a couple of years. I do not recommend waiting until 2029. I mean, I would, if it's possible, you wanted to be ahead of the game. And I think the sooner that you move, you'll be able to take advantage of some of these functionality. And if you're able to, I know, there's a cost associated and there's other consideration as well. So really quickly, I just put a couple of items in here. So if you're looking to, evaluating other systems, what should you be thinking about? Functionality, number one, right? Functionality. You want to, and I wouldn't go crazy, but what I would do is jot down some of the key functionality that you need, like what are the key ones that you need to run your operations, right? You don't have to put together a 500-page document here. So I would put a couple of down, 10, 15, something like along that line. These are your key features that you must have, right? The next thing, then another item to consider is adaptability and an ease of use, and I said avoid overkill. There are a number of systems out there. This is not the only system, although I will say Sage Intacct is a very popular mid-market system. And GP is a mid-market system. So I don't recommend stepping down, meaning going from like a Great Plains to a QuickBook. It's generally a very hard transition. So you generally want to stay within the same market, meaning if you're in GP, you want to go to a mid-market, and Sage Intacct is the mid-market. And like I said, very popular. Adaptability is important. It's the reason why, as a consulting firm, we evaluate what systems are out there, what systems would work for our clients, what would be the next step up. And the reason why Sage Intacct is popular for a number of things, it's easily adaptable, and there's an ease of use. And if there could be systems that out there that has everything under the sun, very, very robust. You can do a lot of things, but if it's not adaptable, right? And adaptability does vary between organization to organization. I couldn't tell you, your organization will be able to adopt this better than another. I mean, this is a personal evaluation here, but it's really important to, when you're looking at a system, to ask yourself, is this a system easy to use? Is it easy to adopt? Because if you have everything in the sun, you can't adopt it. You're not going to be able to fully embrace the system. The third item here, partner. You certainly wanted to select the right partner. That is really important. Someone that perhaps you've worked with in the past, that's important, if it's possible. If not, certainly someone that is in your industry, knows your industry, right? That's I say that's also a key there. So sometimes I say, you can have the most fancy car, but you don't have the right driver, you're still going to get lost. You could still get from point A to point B, but it will not be a smooth ride. And it may not be the most efficient ride either. So getting the right partner is important. And then finally, the cost, right? You're gonna have to, you're gonna need to come up with a budget. You want to make sure that fits into your budget. So cost is also a consideration. But if I had to put them in some order, I would put probably the cost at the end. And the reason I say that is because you might end up wanting to pay a little bit more, right, for the system that is adaptable, that your organization could embrace, and selecting the right partner, and maybe pay a little bit more. So most of the mid-market solutions, I will say, it's a very competitive market. It's, the price is very competitive. So you're not going to see a solution that's heavily priced more than the other. So this is our last question. If you can just take a few seconds to answer them, and then we will move to the next slide because we have about a minute left. All right. So JMT is we're very active when it comes to our webinars and lunch and learns. So we just have a few that's coming up tomorrow. We actually have what's new with Sage Intacct R1. So Sage Intacct does quarterly releases. This is the first release of 2025. It is a technical webinar if you wanted to see what are some of the new features that is released. the first release in 2025. Check that out. This is all on our website, JMT website. Fostering a culture of continuous planning is vital for long-term sustainability. This is a thought leadership webinar. I will be joining this webinar. It is really great. It talks about multi-year budgeting. And then we have the PEO benefits nonprofit. That's also in March. Collaborative budget is a must for ensuring transparency and mission alignment. So this is a bit of a technical webinar. It talks more about collaborative budgeting, utilizing a solution called Martis. And then the Bill's AI-driven usability simplifies automation for nonprofit. This presentation is it's a technical presentation specifically focused on Bill. It's bill.com. And then lastly, we've got our in-person event at Innovate. So I wanted to thank you everyone for attending. I hope this presentation is beneficial for you. If you have any questions for myself or Fabiola, please reach out to us. This is our contact. So thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.